You're standing in a museum, staring at a skull that's 4,000 years old. The jaw is broad, the teeth are straight, and every single one of them is intact. No fillings, no decay, no gaps where a molar should be. This person never touched a toothbrush, never rinsed with mouthwash, never sat in a dentist's chair. And yet their smile puts yours to shame. Now here's what makes that unsettling. You brush twice a day. You floss, or at least you tell your dentist you do. You have access to fluoride, ceramic crowns, and orthodontists who've trained for a decade. And still, there's a good chance you've got at least one cavity right now. 90% of adults worldwide do. Something went terribly wrong between that ancient skull and your bathroom mirror. And the answer isn't what you think. The obvious explanation is hygiene. We assume ancient people had rotten teeth because they didn't clean them. That's the story we've been told since childhood. Brush or suffer the consequences. But that assumption collapses the moment you look at the archaeological evidence. Let's start in Upper Paleolithic Europe, roughly 12,000 years ago. Researchers examined over 1,200 teeth from hunter-gatherer remains scattered across the continent. The caries rate was 0.2%. Not 2%, 0.2. Across the ocean of time in Jomon period Japan, spanning 14,000 to 300 BCE, the picture was almost identical. Out of nearly 1,000 teeth studied, the decay rate hovered around 0.7%. Globally, pre-agricultural populations averaged a caries rate near 0.4%. These people weren't just surviving without dentistry. They were thriving without it. So if brushing wasn't the secret, what was? Let's turn the page. The answer was already in their mouths 3 meals a day. Hunter-gatherers consumed enormous quantities of fibrous plants. Wild roots, tough stems, raw tubers, pine needles, cattail strips. Their daily fiber intake ranged between 120 and 150 grams. Compare that to the modern average of 25 to 30 grams. That's a 5-fold difference, and it matters far more than you'd expect. Those coarse plant fibers didn't just pass through the digestive system, they scoured the teeth on the way in. Laboratory studies have tested this directly. Pine needles removed nearly 2 milligrams of artificial plaque per 60 seconds of chewing. Cattail leaf edges came in at 1.6 milligrams in the same window. For context, that's approaching the mechanical cleaning power of a modern manual toothbrush. Every meal was a cleaning session. Every bite of root or stem was a pass through nature's car wash. Bristles made of cellulose spinning across enamel. Saliva flooding the surface like a rinse cycle. But here's the critical detail most people miss. It wasn't just about removing plaque. It was about what wasn't feeding the plaque in the first place. Plaque is a biofilm, a living colony of bacteria clinging to your teeth. The most notorious resident of that colony is a microbe called Streptococcus mutans. It's been in human mouths for thousands of years. But for most of that history, it was essentially dormant. A quiet tenant in a stable neighborhood. It had no reason to cause trouble because it lacked its primary fuel source. Sugar. Without sugar and refined starches, Streptococcus mutans can't do much. It metabolizes sugars into acid, and that acid is what dissolves enamel, creating cavities. No sugar, no acid. No acid, no cavities. The fortress holds. For tens of thousands of years, this was the default state of the human mouth. A balanced ecosystem where bacteria existed but couldn't wage war. Then we started farming, and everything changed. The agricultural revolution, beginning roughly 10,000 years ago, is celebrated as one of humanity's greatest leaps. Stable food supplies, permanent settlements, the birth of civilization. But nobody mentions the dental cost. When humans shifted from wild foods to cultivated cereals, they introduced something new into their mouths. Sticky, starchy carbohydrates that clung to tooth surfaces and fermented into acid. Now, the skeptic in you might say that starch isn't sugar. Bread isn't candy, and you'd be partially right. Raw wheat starch is only about 50% digestible. But Neolithic cooks weren't eating raw wheat. They were making porridge, grinding grain, heating it with water. Cooking pushes starch through a process called gelatinization, which shatters the granule structure and raises digestibility to roughly 75%. That cooked porridge became a sticky paste on teeth, and oral bacteria evolved to feast on it. The evidence is stark. Early farming communities in Europe's linear pottery culture, dating to around 5500 BCE, show caries rates jumping to 4.3%. Pre-dynastic Egyptians around 3500 BCE hit 6.2%. Compared to the hunter-gatherer baseline of under 1%, these numbers represent a tenfold increase in tooth decay within just a few thousand years of adopting agriculture. The grain that fed civilizations was quietly rotting their teeth. But the cereal was only the opening act. The real devastation arrived with refined sugar. For most of recorded history, sweetness was rare. Medieval Europeans consumed roughly 1.2 kilograms of honey and sugar per person per year. That's about the weight of a small pineapple, spread across 12 months. By 1650, Dutch Republic citizens had pushed that to 5.4 kilograms. A century later, the British were consuming over 10 kilograms annually. And by 1900, Americans were devouring 30 kilograms of sugar per year. Each jump corresponded to a surge in dental disease that no amount of tooth powder or early dental instruments could contain. Think of your tooth as a fortress. For millennia, the gates held firm. Fibrous foods kept the walls clean. Low sugar levels kept the invaders starved. But sugar was the key that fit the lock perfectly. As consumption climbed, the gates swung wide open and bacterial armies poured through. What came next would change not just our teeth, but the very shape of our faces. Here's something that might rearrange how you think about braces. They're not correcting a genetic flaw. They're treating a dietary injury that's been accumulating for 10,000 years. When hunter-gatherers chewed tough, raw, fibrous foods, the mechanical stress on their jaws stimulated bone growth. Their dental arches were wide and spacious. Upper Paleolithic humans had an average intercanine width of 32.5 millimeters. Plenty of room for every tooth to sit comfortably in line, but soft processed grains demanded far less chewing force. And bone responds to the forces placed on it. Reduce the load and the bone doesn't grow as robustly. By the Neolithic period, average intercanine width had dropped to 29.9 millimeters. By the Iron Age, it was down to 26.8. That's a contraction of nearly 6 millimeters. 6 millimeters doesn't sound like much until you realize it's the width of an entire premolar. Remove that space and teeth have nowhere to go but sideways, overlapping, twisting, crowding into each other like too many passengers in a subway car. The rate of this shrinkage was approximately 0.5 millimeter per century during the critical period between 6,000 and 3,000 BCE, when cereal-based agriculture was spreading most aggressively across Eurasia. Our jaws were literally being reshaped by our lunch. Today, 56% of American adolescents between 12 and 18 have worn braces. In countries where sugar consumption exceeds 25 kilograms per person per year, orthodontic rates hit 55%. In lower sugar nations, that figure drops to around 40%. The correlation isn't subtle. It's a direct line from what we eat to how our jaws grow, to whether we need metal wires to straighten the result. But while our jaws were shrinking, something even more sinister was happening at the microscopic level. The bacteria in our mouths were evolving, and they were getting meaner. Streptococcus mutans has been part of the human oral microbiome for at least 5,000 years. Its core lineage diverged around 5,300 years before the present. For most of that time, it was a relatively mild organism. It could metabolize some sugars, produce some acid, but it lacked the genetic weaponry to build the dense, destructive biofilms that characterize modern dental plaque. That changed after 1750 CE. Researchers analyzing ancient dental calculus, the hardened plaque preserved on archaeological teeth, found that a critical gene variant called GTFB first appeared in samples dating to the mid-18th century. This gene encodes a glucosyltransferase enzyme that supercharges the bacterium's ability to metabolize sucrose and construct robust biofilms. It's the difference between a small campfire and an industrial furnace. Post-1850 strains carry 2 to 3 additional virulence genes compared to their ancestors. The timing is no coincidence. The 18th and 19th centuries were exactly when sugar production exploded globally, driven by colonial plantations and industrial refining. As sugar flooded human mouths in unprecedented quantities, natural selection favored the bacterial strains best equipped to exploit it. Streptococcus mutans didn't just benefit from sugar, it evolved specifically to weaponize it. The invaders upgraded their siege equipment to match the new supply lines. Now, some scholars push back against framing diet as the sole villain. They argue that genetics play a significant role. Twin studies suggest that up to 30% of jaw size variability is heritable. Prenatal nutrition, overall health, salivary composition, these factors matter too. And they point to archaeological cases where early farmers eating abrasive grains still maintained relatively low caries rates. These objections have merit. Biology is never a single variable equation. But consider this. Enamel thickness has remained essentially constant across human populations over tens of thousands of years. The structural defenses of our teeth haven't degraded. What changed was the input, what we put into our mouths and the microbial ecosystem that responded. The global synchronous rise in caries and jaw crowding tracks far more closely with dietary transitions than with slow genetic drift. Genetics set the stage. Diet wrote the play. There's also a debate that's still unresolved and fascinating. Could fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, traditional pickled vegetables, actually modulate cariogenic bacteria? Pilot studies in rural populations have only just begun to explore this question. The oral microbiome is a frontier as vast and unexplored as the gut microbiome was 20 years ago. We may discover that some ancient food practices protected teeth in ways we haven't yet measured. Another open question involves the precise chronology of bacterial evolution. Some molecular clock analyses place the emergence of key sucrose metabolizing genes in the 17th century. Others push it to the 19th. The discrepancy matters because it changes our understanding of how quickly microbial populations can adapt to human dietary shifts, whether it takes decades or centuries for the damage to compound. And there's one more detail worth sitting with. Isotope analysis of bone collagen from early farming populations shows a sharp drop of 2 to 3 per meal in nitrogen-15 ratios within just a few centuries of adopting cereal agriculture. That signature tells us these populations weren't gradually transitioning. They were fundamentally replacing protein-rich wild diets with carbohydrate-heavy agricultural ones. The shift was fast, it was total, and it left chemical fingerprints in their bones. So what does all of this mean for you? Standing in front of your bathroom mirror tonight, it means that the dental crisis we live with isn't a natural condition. It's a side effect of dietary progress. Every cavity you've ever had, every crooked tooth, every set of braces, these aren't failures of hygiene. They're consequences of a 10,000-year experiment in feeding ourselves differently. Our mouths were designed for a world that no longer exists, a world of tough roots and fibrous stems, where every meal cleans your teeth and every bite built your jaw. The philosophical reframe is this: we didn't lose our dental health. We traded it unknowingly for the calories that built civilization. If this story reshaped how you think about what's sitting on your plate, you'll want to hear what we've uncovered about the foods that literally rewired the human brain. That one's waiting for you right now. A skull in a museum, 4,000 years silent, still has a better smile than most of us. And now you know why.